Hi all, my name is Ben Finberg. I'm the Director of IT at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico, and today I'm going to be talking you through an install of ArchivesSpace on a Windows server. We're going to be using Windows Server 2008 Release 2 and a MySQL database. The reason for doing this is that all of the information for installing ArchivesSpace in this format is up on ArchivesSpace's GitHub site. The information is pretty thorough, but at least for me, I found it a little bit confusing in terms of the way it's laid out. It's a little bit non-linear, and every once in a while there's a couple of assumptions that maybe we know a little bit more than we do about the installs. So that's why I'm here. I'm going to try to do this step by step, and here we go. Apologies for saying a lot and rambling. So first things first, you do have a couple of prerequisites that you're going to need to download for free off the internet. Those are the Microsoft .NET Framework 4.0. Depending on the version of Windows that you have, you either need to download it off the internet or it could be a feature that you actually install from the control panel. Additionally, you will need MySQL Server. The one that seems to be ample for ArchivesSpace is the free version called MySQL Web Community Server. You'll also need the MySQL connector for Java, and all of this information and where to download these things is available on the ArchivesSpace GitHub site. You'll need to download Java itself. You'll need to download proc run for Apache. And last but not least, you'll certainly need to install ArchivesSpace, or you'll need to download ArchivesSpace itself. So let's go ahead and dive in. A couple of things I've already done. I've installed the .NET Framework and I have installed Java, so that's already done. So at this point, I'm going to launch into the install of MySQL, and we're going to do that right now. There's a couple of different options for installing MySQL. There's a developer version, there's server, there's client, there's a full install. And what you're going to see here is that we're going to do just the server version, which should be ample for ArchivesSpace. So go ahead and launch the MySQL installer, and then in a second, a menu is going to pop up that gives you your choice of what type of an install you want to do. So as we page forward, go ahead and do server only. Again, that has everything that you need, and go ahead and advance. And beyond that, aside from needing to know your SQL root password, which we'll enter in a little later in the install, all of the defaults are totally fine. So we'll kind of go from there. All right, so as we get into the install wizard, once again, all of the defaults are totally fine. Leave it on port 3306. Go ahead and advance. The one thing you're going to need is a root password, and your organization is probably going to have standards for this. For this one, I'm just going to type 1234, but obviously you're going to want to make that a little bit more secure in your production install. You will want to make a note of that because you're going to need that as you get into the command prompt later on when we're actually configuring the ArchivesSpace database that sits on MySQL. All right, so we're all done with the MySQL install. Next thing we're going to want to do is place ArchivesSpace in its permanent location, and I just like to put it right on the root of C. So here's the zip file I downloaded of ArchivesSpace, and we're going to take this ArchivesSpace folder, and we're going to go ahead and just copy it right there to the root of C. Okay, so as you can see, the ArchivesSpace folder is now extracted, and we have everything we need right on the root of C. The next step is we are going to go into this download that I already grabbed. The proc run zip, which is this. And there's two different files in that zip from Apache that we're going to need. We're going to need both the prunmgr and prun.srv. And we're going to want to copy both of those from the zip, and we're going to want to place them inside the ArchivesSpace directory, which ArchivesSpace needs to run. Now we're also going to need to make some changes to the environmental variables that are related to Java. And in order to do that, we actually need to know the directory path to which we installed Java. So in this particular case, I have C, program files, Java, and then this is very important, the JRE 1.8.0 underscore 77. This is going to become a really important section as we adjust our environmental variables. And there's two, well, we actually need to make one adjustment and we need to make one addition in here. So as I go into the environmental variables, I click on Start, right-click Computer, go to Properties, Advanced System Settings, and then down here, Environment Variables. The one that already exists is just called Path, and we're going to want to edit that to the bin directory under Java. So I'm going to come in here and paste. And here we have C, program files x86, Java, JRE 1.8.0 underscore 77. This is the part that's going to vary depending on what version of Java you have. And then I'm going to put another backslash and bin. Additionally, we're going to want to add a system variable entitled Java underscore home. And that is one directory up. So C, program files x86, Java, JRE 1.8.0 underscore 77. So that's all set. And for good measure, I found that this would be a great opportunity to reboot your computer. So let's go ahead and do that right now just to make sure that those changes are actually in and underway. All right, so we're rebooted, and at this point, we're going to go ahead and open up the MySQL command line client and actually start to configure the shell that will be our ArchivesSpace database. So we go into MySQL, MySQL Server 5.7, and go into the command line client. This is where you're going to need that root password that you entered earlier on, so go ahead and punch that in. And we're going to need to add 2 lines of code here, or execute 2 lines of code. So the first one, and all of this again is on the GitHub site, is to actually create the database. And I've just grabbed that from a text file over on my other screen, like so. Make sure the semicolon's at the end. And then we actually need to create the ArchivesSpace user and grant all permissions for that. So that's the second line. And voila. So you can go ahead and get out of the SQL command line client. We're going to go ahead and move along. The next adjustment is to actually adjust the config.rb file in ArchivesSpace, and we're going to make a couple of different changes here. So this is located in C, ArchivesSpace, config, and config.rb. You can open this with any text editor. I've found that it's totally sufficient to use WordPad. If you prefer Notepad, that's fine. Emacs, you name it. And we're going to change a couple of different lines of the configuration file. The first is this appconfig db underscore URL. And I'm finding what I need off of my configuration file. So there's that. And then there's 2 other lines that we'll need as well. And they're these 2. The first one is you're going to want to set this, you're going to want to pull out the hash, and you're going to want to change it from false to true. And then secondly, you're going to want to remove the hash for the next line as well. And that's otherwise totally fine. So go ahead and save. And that's that. The next step is to grab a jar file from the Java connector. So we're going to go in and do that now. Here's your MySQL connector for Java. And this is the jar file that you're going to want to copy. So go ahead and grab that from your zip file. And then go ahead back into your live ArchivesSpace file. And you're going to want to put that in the lib directory. Go ahead and paste, and there we go. And now it's time to actually run the script that is going to configure your ArchivesSpace database. Go ahead and right-click Command Prompt and run as an administrator so you have enough kick to do what you need. And navigate to C ArchivesSpace scripts. And you're going to want to run the setup-database batch file. Go ahead and run that. If everything above has been configured properly, you should be all set. And this is going to take about a minute to do the full configuration, so just sit tight and watch it run. All right, so the script that created the database properly is all set, and the next step is to go into a batch file in the directory C ArchivesSpace launcher, and the one we're going to want to run is service.bat. And what this does is it's actually going to create the ArchivesSpace service, so ArchivesSpace is able to run in the background in Windows without having to be launched in the foreground every single time. So just run service.bat. Once again, if you've done all the steps up to now, this should run fine. This is telling you the things that you might have to do in terms of setting the Java environment variable to continue. That seems to have been successful. So we're in kind of the home stretch now. Next, you're going to want to go and find in your C ArchivesSpace directory the ArchivesSpace service W, which is just a quick Windows app that allows you to start and stop the ArchivesSpace service. Launch that. And as you can see, it set the ArchivesSpace service for automatic. Currently it's stopped. We're going to want to launch that. And it takes a while to start ArchivesSpace, probably about a minute in the background. While that's going, that's pretty much the perfect amount of time to make one final adjustment, which is to open up your Windows firewall to allow the ArchivesSpace ports through. So let's go into Control Panel and open up our firewall for ArchivesSpace. Actually, let's do this a different way. ArchivesSpace uses 4 different ports, and of course we want to allow them all. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click and say New Rule. I'm going to want to change that to port. And we want to allow 4 specific ports, and those are 8080, 8081, whoops, missing a comma, 8089, and 8090. Allow the connection. And that should be that. So at this point, if you've done everything right, you should be able to actually launch a browser, and whether you're local or not, you should be able to get to ArchivesSpace. And there we are. So thanks for suffering through that with me. I hope this was educational and edifying, and happy archiving. Have a good day.